Thanks for joining me today at InvestorIdeas.com, Cleantech and Climate Change podcast, looking at today's problems and solutions for the future. I'm your host, Dawn Van Zandt, founder of InvestorIdeas.com, and hoping to share our way of making a difference in climate change. Today I'm talking to Lloyd Spencer, president of Deep Green Waste and Recycling Inc., traded on the OTC Pink, DGWR, a sustainable waste and recycling management services company. Lloyd discusses recent news that the company signed a letter of intent to acquire the assets of Amwaste Inc., a commercial waste and debris disposal services company serving the Golden Isles region of coastal Georgia. This is the second interview with Lloyd and a follow-up to a podcast dated July 28th, where he discussed the company's acquisition strategy. Lloyd, thanks for joining me today. For listeners, can you give a brief background on your company, Deep Green, and how your recent news and your letter of intent to acquire Amwaste really fits into your overall business strategy?
Thanks very much, Don, and thanks for having me. Deep Green Waste and Recycling, it's a sustainable and recycling management company, and it's for commercial customers. And we did recently announce a letter of intent to acquire the assets of Amwaste. And they are, in fact, a commercial waste and debris disposal company over in the Golden Isles region of Georgia. So to put in context, the waste we'll call it the waste management industry in the United States, it's a $52 billion industry and has over 10,000 companies in the industry. So what Deep Green Waste and Recycling is doing is pursuing an acquisition strategy for bringing in companies that are profitable today and have room to grow. In some cases, it would be a company like Amwaste, which has a regional footprint in Georgia and has the ability to grow in the southeastern United States. It has the opportunity to bring the materials that are being collected and then to repurpose them or to send them over to recycling management companies that will go ahead and repurpose it and put it into other materials, like plastics, for example, or even construction waste. So we look at in many ways, as Amwaste is one of the collection points for waste and recycling materials. If you look at the history of Amwaste, its business model has been to work with local companies along that area, and especially during times where you have storm surges or you have construction. That's really its footprint, and it has a very loyal customer base that stay with it. So what we'd like to do is to, as we bring in Amwaste into the family, we would look at bringing some process improvements to help them grow their business, to expand their geographical footprint, and even bring some operational improvements, like, for example, the ability for us to electronically track assets, for example, and to be able to help them to identify where we can bring recycling materials to, and building those relationships.
And what do you think is a realistic time frame to complete your due diligence and finalize this acquisition?
Yeah, I think this acquisition, we can certainly be completing this during the next 60 or so days, we think. There's some due diligence time that goes into this. What we're doing is make sure we go through the usual due diligence that you go through with any acquisition, making sure we work with the auditors, make sure we go over everything, and then getting all the SEC filings done properly.
And looking at what you were just talking about with Amwaste and taking its existing business model and expanding it both in terms of territory and then adding in technology, looking at other potential acquisitions in the future, what kind of companies are you looking for your portfolio? And when you take that same approach of taking an existing company and then moving it up into the current, era of technology and just taking it to the next level, is that really your overall plan?
Exactly. So, for example, we're talking with a debris and junk removal type company. So it is a company that works quite a bit in the construction kind of area, and also works with apartment complexes. And in this case, they have access to the compactors, and we have the ability to put Internet of Things devices, these I'll call it monitoring devices, that will go ahead and let you know when the compactors are full. And instead of always having a regular pickup time, 3 days a week or 4 days, whatever it might be, you can have it on demand, which ends up saving money for the customer and brings great efficiencies overall to the operation. We're also looking even in the recycling area, especially in the area of plastics. And I think that's an area that we're going to see some interesting growth in, and also some technological innovations. So, for example, when people think of plastics, they always think of plastic bags, but there are lots of other plastic materials that are today going into the landfills. And some of those plastics, whether it's based on polypropylene, polyethylene, or any number of other plastics, you can repurpose those into many other products. I won't necessarily want to talk about what those products are, but suffice to say that it's going to be some technically difficult areas in the past. It would have been to pursue this, but there have been a lot of improvements in the industry for repurposing plastics in areas that you wouldn't normally expect. One example you've probably read about are even taking plastics and putting them into cinder block, I'll call it cinder block type of products for building materials. That's an area that people wouldn't have thought of even 5 years ago. And I'm not saying we're looking at that specifically, but it's that kind of approach to recycling that we're going to be looking, I'll call it outside the box, in pursuing that. And in that way, when people think of technological improvements, they usually think of iPhones or Tesla cars. But in fact, we're looking at technical improvements and innovations even when it comes to biological and chemical technological innovations. And those are the kind of companies we'll be looking at down the road and certainly working with, no less.
One of the things I find really ironic with COVID-19, and you know, there's been so much media coverage about how the environment and has improved from it because air and water are cleaner. You know, we're seeing nature be able to heal itself. But the biggest irony, I think, is in your area of expertise, is in recycling, in that they stopped the reuse of reusable bags. So plastic bags were back in the game when they'd almost been eliminated in a lot of stores where I live. And and then what we're seeing that's really sad, that, you know, as people are wearing face masks and saying, oh, be kind, be safe, all of these disposable face masks, they're all being thrown all over the ground. I don't know if that's happening where you live, but it's definitely, you know, I've had people tell me they've gone hiking in, you know, beautiful, serene, you know, out in nature, and they're finding these disposable masks being thrown all over there. So I think the demand for the recycling business is one of the few ironies that's come out of COVID, whereas a lot of other environmental areas have seen these massive improvements. We've gone backwards with that.
Yeah. I think during any time of transition, you get a period where there is an incredible amount of waste being generated, just like, for example, you mentioned things like face masks, for example, plastic bags in grocery stores, without a doubt. And in years past, I think people would have thought, we're just going to throw them away and nobody's going to think twice about it. But people are thinking about it. And I'm finding that customers, whether they're in commercial or in residential, are looking for ways that they can responsibly recycle if only they knew where to recycle it. So even when you look at in a commercial space with food processors, they go through an incredible amount of plastic films and plastic packaging. And the customers, they end up unpacking their groceries and their fruits and vegetables that are all wrapped in plastic, and they wonder, what am I going to do with it? And therefore, there's an opportunity to take those very take those very same waste products and to repurpose them into other plastics. And the plastics industry has certainly got the message a little bit with respect to looking for different polymers that will break down in the environment. But at the same time, I'm certainly being asked, are there ways that we can take those plastic materials to put those into recycle and repurpose them into other commercial products? That's one of the things we're certainly looking at. And looking forward at the acquisition targets, we'll be looking at 2, perhaps 3 flavors of companies. One are companies in the collection side and efficiently collecting, and Amwaste is one of those companies. And we're looking at, there are many others out there. We're looking at many right now. And the other is, how do you repurpose those plastics or those paper products and actually make money by recycling? And therein lies the challenge. And we've already seen some companies in the recycling space, in the commercial industry with plastics, that are in fact making money. But they need to grow. In order to grow, you need capital. And that's where partnering with Deep Green Waste is to everybody's advantage. It's to the advantage of the shareholders of Deep Green Waste, of course. It's to the advantage of the companies that want to come into the Deep Green family so they can grow their operation. And it's certainly to the advantage of the customers who are looking for ways in which they can recycle responsibly and know that their products or their waste products are being recycled in a way that they don't have to think about that they're generating a problem, but in fact they're generating a solution.
And in closing, how do you make this story sexy for investors when you're looking at, waste, commercial waste and disposal? It doesn't sound that sexy. Mm-hmm. They're all these young investors, and people are looking at companies like Tesla and all the EV companies and some of the Cleantech companies and hydrogen fuel cells. That they sound really cool and they sound amazing. So maybe going backwards, if you could reference, because there's a lot of listeners that didn't hear your first podcast, maybe talk about your tech background a little bit and how you're going to use that to make this a sexy story.
You bet. Well, my background, in fact, does touch technology area quite a bit. Some of that background was in the robotics and the Internet of Things area. So the ability to remotely monitor equipment and to know whether your waste and recycling needs to be picked up regularly, or whether you want to have it picked up on demand. Those are some things you can do with today with Internet of Things devices, with wireless technologies that you couldn't have done, say 7 or so years ago, or even 5 very well. Looking at it from the perspective of what is a sexy investment, it really depends on it depends on the person you're talking with. For people who are looking at building an investment portfolio that will grow reliably, to them the waste management and the recycling business is very sexy because there's a constant flow of materials and cash through the industry itself. So the way they look at it is it's a very stable and constantly growing industry. From the perspective of is it going to be a unique growth opportunity because Deep Green Waste is going to find some unique areas, I think that's also one of the more exciting areas here for not only just collecting the materials, but how we're going to do exciting new things for recycling those waste materials in ways that have not been thought of in the past. And that will give the company an edge to take those materials, recycle them, as opposed to many of the companies in the waste management business today simply put them in landfills. So that I think is going to be the 2 pieces of this. Is there are going to be technological innovations with respect to how you collect and how you operationalize the industry or the operations, but as well new technological innovations for how you actually recycle these things so they never get back into the waste cycle, but instead they go into the recycling part of the flow.
Well, plus, I guess by combining both, if you've got both the waste disposal and collection and then the ability to repurpose, you're doubling your revenue stream instantly, and there's a synergy between them. So, it makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
As you said, a lot of it, we think we're being really responsible because we're putting our recycle bins out there, but then they're just stored somewhere, or we don't know what really happens to them.
Exactly.
So I think we'd all be motivated to be more responsible too if we knew that the plastic we were putting out in the front of our home was actually going to turn into something else. I think that's a fantastic way to approach it, and by combining both entities, it makes a lot of sense. Well, again, I really appreciate the conversation, and hopefully we can do a follow-up as you get closer to closing on your first acquisition, and you may have other things in the pipeline as we discuss that.
And I look forward to talking about those in the coming weeks.
Great. Thank you so much.
To hear more Cleantech podcasts, visit the Cleantech and Climate Change page on Investor Ideas. You can find it on our top template. Also, Investor Ideas has a lineup of other podcasts and themes, including the AII, the Crypto Corner, our cannabis podcast called Cannabis News and Stocks on the Move, rated one of the top investor podcasts in the sector, Play by Play, a podcast looking at sports and esports news, and Exploring Mining. To listen to any of our podcasts, visit our podcast page on Investor Ideas at investorideas.com/audio. And a reminder, you can hear our podcasts on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker.com, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music, and most audio platforms available to you. If you like any of our podcasts, we would appreciate you recommending them or reviewing them on your audio platform. And to help you follow and track clean tech and renewable energy stocks, Investor Ideas has created a directory of publicly traded stocks in the sector. You can find that by going to our homepage, looking on the sidebar and looking at renewable energy and environmental themes, and you'll find our stock directories there. Investor Ideas does remind all of investors to read our disclaimers and disclosures on our site. You can find them at investorideas.com/about-disclaimer.asp. It is important to read these. And this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investment involves risk and a possible loss of investment. Thank you again and have a great day. That's it for today. Do something great for this beautiful planet each and every day. For disclosure purposes, Deep Green Waste Recycling is a paid monthly featured clean tech company on investorideas.com. Please visit our disclosure and disclaimer pages for more info.